Let's revisit one of the first slides that we started with on this course. We mentioned that for you to be able to hack remotely, you would need 4 different components. You will need the IP address of the machine you're targeting, exposed remote service running on that machine you're targeting, vulnerabilities in that service, and an exploit to be able to take advantage of that vulnerability. In the previous section, we covered what the internet is and why IP addresses are needed, what they are, what's the difference between a public IP and a private IP, how DNS helps us translate domain names or URLs to IP addresses, what servers are, for example, what a web server is or what a DNS server is, and how each server has an IP address assigned to it. We learned how to discover the IP address of the machine we're targeting. Together, we discovered the IP address of Google in your country and the IP address of hackersacademy.com. So now that we know what an IP address is and how do we discover the IP address, it is time to move on to the next stage. In this section, we're going to be covering services, what they are, how do we find them, and how do we find information about them. So what are services and what are ports? We talked earlier about web servers. We went through an exercise where we set up our own laptops to become web servers. We switched on, if you remember, some features on our Windows machine, the World Wide Web Publishing Service, and that transformed my laptop to a web server. So I had a website being hosted on my own laptop. When that happened, my laptop became a web server. So for the context of this course, consider the service is what runs on the server. So for example, when my laptop became a web server, because I was serving a website on it, on my laptop there was a web service running. It was switched on and it was running, waiting for somebody to connect to it. Here's an example that will make it a little bit easier to understand. Think of services as mobile applications. Right now on your mobile device, there's a number of applications, such as your camera application, your social applications, your calendar applications, and so on. Some of these applications will require access to the internet, whereas some of the other applications will not. So if you have an Android phone, for example, and you try to install a new application, it will come up with a list of permissions that the application requires from you. Sometimes, or more often than not actually, one of these permissions is access to the Wi-Fi or to the internet. Because a lot of these applications would want to connect back to the internet to retrieve data and updates and so on. There are other applications though that do not require access to the internet. So for example, it's very rare for you to be updating your camera application. Although it's an application running on your mobile that you use to take photos and videos, it's very rare that you would go online and update the camera application alone separately. So although these applications or quote-unquote services are running on your mobile, some of them would be connecting to the internet and some wouldn't. The same applies to any computing machine or any server. When I transformed my laptop into a web server, the web server service would allow it to connect to the internet or would allow people from the internet to connect to it. There are other services, however, that would not require connection to the internet but need to be running for certain operations on your machine. Let me show you a video so that you'd have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. And feel free to follow along with this video. The more you practice, the better you understand. On your Windows system, go to the bar on the bottom, right-click, and click on Task Manager. Click on More Details, and then navigate to the Services tab on the top right corner. This will show you every single service running on your machine. Don't worry if you don't understand what all these services are for. It's not necessary for now. Some of them are very easy to understand, such as the Windows Firewall, for example, or your antivirus that's running. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna try to start and stop some of these services and see what happens. Let's go to the control panel and reinstall the World Wide Web service. So again, I'm going to set up my laptop as a web server. I scroll down to the Internet Information Services and I reinstall it. We'll give it a second, and when it's done, I go to my browser and I refresh my home page. And you see that now I have a website running on my machine. So in that context, my laptop right now is a server with a web service running on it. Let's try and find the exact name of this service. I regroup the services to filter out the running ones, and here it is, World Wide Web Publishing Service. This is the service running behind the website. This is what makes it possible for me to access a website. Let's see what happens if I stop this service. Go down and click on Open Services, regroup the services by name, and scroll down to find the World Wide Web Publishing Service. We can see in the status here that it's running. I'm going to right click on it and stop it. So right now, I stopped the service behind the web server. I'm going to go back to my browser and I will try to refresh the page. And as you can see, I failed to load the page because the web service behind the web server is not running. I'll go back, right click and start it again and refresh the page. And here you go, it's running again. So now we know what a server is and what a service behind the server is. Obviously, like your mobile has so many different applications, a server can also run multiple services. We've seen how many services were running on my machine. So for example, a server could be serving you websites and emails at the same time. Now the question is, how would a server know how to direct incoming and outgoing communication? So for example, if a server is receiving web communication, somebody is asking it for a website, how would it know that this is website traffic and where would it direct to, as opposed to, say, for example, email traffic? This is where service ports come in place. Each service has an assigned port that accepts communication meant for that service. Think of a port as a doorway. And for that port to accept communication, it needs to be open. Again, such as a doorway. If it's blocked, it would not be able to accept any communication. So each service would have an assigned port for it, ready to accept communication as long as the port is open. These ports would have numbers, and a lot of these numbers are standardized around the world. So for example, if I'm going to be talking to a web service, there's a very good chance that I'm going to be talking to a port with a port number 80. If I'm going to be talking to a mail service or an email service, there's a very good chance that I'm going to be talking to a port number 25. So if you open your browser right now and type hackersacademy.com, you're going to be able to access the Hackers Academy website. Try, however, to type hackersacademy.com:8080, which is the stand port number for web. You'll see that you will get the same result. Why? Because your web browser will direct the traffic to port 80 anyway. So imagine here that you're talking to the Hackers Academy server. And at Hackers Academy, we provide two services for you. We have the website and we have the email. Whenever you're trying to retrieve information from our website, you are going to be communicating with port 80 on hackersacademy.com. Whenever you're sending or receiving emails, however, you are going to be communicating with port number 25 on hackersacademy.com. So here's your mission for this section. I'd like you to find out how many port numbers exist. What's the total number of ports out there? HackThisSite.org has 3 services running on 3 different ports. Port number 22, port number 80, and port number 443. Don't worry for now again what TCP is. We're going to be explaining that later on. For now though, I'd like you to determine what these services are. What is the service running behind port number 22? What is the service running behind port 80? And what is the service running behind 443? We've already discussed what runs on port 80. So find out what the other 2 services are for.